There are a lot of myths and confusion out there about how to care for your brain after experiencing a concussion, both immediate and long-term. So here to walk us through the right way to proceed is upper cervical chiropractor, Dr. Mylene Hopf. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
So as the health specialist, I've done lots of stories on concussions, and you know, what I continue to find is that people do not understand that something like a concussion is very serious. It's actually a brain injury that needs to be treated and managed properly. Do you find this too?
Absolutely. That's one of my biggest concerns with concussions, is that it's an invisible injury. You can't see it, so people don't take it seriously. And people shake it off, you know, oh, just go back, you're fine, don't worry about it. But the repercussions of not managing it properly can be very detrimental in the long term. And so one of my goals and my passions is to educate people in terms of recognizing what actually is a concussion and what you need to do to manage it immediately and mitigate the long-term repercussions of dealing with a brain injury, essentially.
Well, let's start right there. So what exactly is a brain injury and where should we start?
So when you have a concussion, without getting into too much detail, basically what happens is there's damage to the brain and it creates an energy crisis. So instead of your brain being able to utilize all this energy that it needs to produce, all of a sudden that's depleted. So it's like your battery on your cell phone, all of a sudden there's no charge. And we don't have the ability to just plug into a source to recharge that. So what you need to do is rest your brain. But people don't understand what that means.
Right, what does that look like?
So if you break your leg,
yes,
there's no question. You're not going to be using that leg the same way you would be. But when we think of resting your brain, the challenge is that, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Your brain has a lot of things it needs to be doing. It has all these functional things that it needs to be doing that you don't even have to think about. So when we think of resting your brain, that means that nothing else happens. No texting, no TV, no watching movies, no conversation, no work, no stimulating environments. And that, I think, is where the difficulty for managing it is, that people, that's hard to fathom. It's like, well, I have a life, I have a family. How do I rest my brain?
Right.
But then you look at then in terms of, well, what does it look like to take a week off from your day-to-day activities compared to the long-term repercussions of not properly managing that brain injury?
So what are those repercussions if you don't manage your brain properly after concussion? What could happen?
Long-term symptoms: brain fog, fatigue, headaches, difficulty remembering things, people dealing with severe light sensitivity, sound sensitivity, unable to be in a stimulating environment for the long term. So you think of someone who has 2 or 3 kids at home.
Sure.
What does that look like? Then all of a sudden, that's, I mean, it's overwhelming to begin with.
Yes.
But then it's even more so, it's debilitating. And people then need to go and sit in a dark room with no light, no sound, nothing. That's very difficult to manage in the long term.
Are you describing something called post-concussion syndrome? I've heard that term before, but never been quite clear on what it means.
So post-concussion syndrome is basically after 30 days, you're in that post-concussive syndrome. Most concussions do resolve within about 2 to 4 weeks, no problem. Once you get beyond that 30 days and you're still experiencing symptoms from that concussion, that's what we describe as post-concussion syndrome. Okay. And that can go on for years.
Oh my goodness. Wow. That is scary. So why is concussion awareness so important then? And why do we need to take it so seriously?
From my perspective, it's important because it's manageable and the information isn't out there. So from my perspective, if we can empower you to know how to deal with an injury, then you don't have to worry so much about it. People shouldn't live in little glass bubbles to be able to enjoy life. But I feel like this concussion, with everything that's been portrayed in the media and the movie that's come out and all this, people are scared of their kids playing sports, of themselves. What happens is a very scary thing. So I think if you can understand that a concussion is an injury, but it's a manageable injury if it's dealt with appropriately immediately.
Right.
And so to recognize when you have a concussion, not to downplay it, so that you don't then go seek care 3 or 4 weeks later, and now we have this huge unmanageable injury. To just recognize it's okay if you've had a concussion.
Now you've got a public workshop coming up to help with all of this. Tell me a little bit about that.
So we've got a workshop coming up next Thursday where it's basically an hour of information and time where people can ask questions, and we'll really get to the bottom of what they need to know and what they need to know moving forward to take care of that.
To take care of yourself and your brain. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mylene. This has been so interesting and helpful.
Thank you for having me.
There you go, Andy, looking after your brain.